a bit more of an in-depth video on the yz500 hybrid that are water cooled as well. I did do a previous video which I was going out for a test ride on it, so I just did a quick sort of video going around it, but just thought I'd do something. Since then I've made some changes. I put a different swing arm in it, I've put some different bars on it, I put some X-Trig PDHS bar mounts, and I've had the crank balanced, which I did say in a previous video that I was thinking of doing, just to cut down the vibration, because it does vibrate a lot. So anything that I can do to minimise that, I've sort of gone along that route. So yeah, I'll just go and do that video now. Right, so I used a 5-speed Yamaha yz400 engine, which I built up out of parts, and then I used I think it's a 40T, which is like 84, 85 cylinder, which is the 5-port or 6-port or whatever. There's different transfer. There's 2 bridges in the later transfer ports on the later cylinders. Don't really see much difference between the pair. I can't tell anyway. So I used a 2008 yz500 chassis, and I didn't cut the frame or the cradle out or anything like that. I didn't really want to do that because it kind of weakens it, and then you go and get the frame annealed and all that sort of stuff. It's a bit of a mither, to be fair. So what I figured out I could do, so I had to drill out the 2 steel collars in the back of the engine where the swing arm pivot goes through, because the YZF is slightly larger diameter, so we put them in a lathe, bored them out, so that was that bit that fit, and put the cases into the chassis. And I could actually get the engine in. If I just drop the swing arm back, I can tilt the engine in and get the exhaust port through the original Y piece at the front here. And all I had to do was just kind of trim a tiny, you can't really see it in there, just trim a tiny little bit off the frame so that it clears the exhaust, which you can't see because I've got this 4-stroke carbon guard on. But anyway, I can't get the cylinder off without taking the swing arm out and moving it back a little bit. So the under part of the engine, if you just look there, I just the swing arm, see the engine bolt went through, and it basically laid on the frame. So when I removed the original 4-stroke brackets, I just thought, well, if I can do that, I'll get some tube aluminium and cut out a section where it sits on the frame, and then the bolt will actually sit on the frame, if you understand what I'm trying to say. Because the YZ was originally fitted in kind of tubes like that on the steel frame. It was the simplest thing to do. And then make the front brackets, which if I go around this side, use the original mounting point for the 250 engine. Got to make those brackets there. Now you see the radius here. My first brackets were thinner aluminium, and that radius was quite sharp, and it kept cracking because of the amount of vibration with the aluminium frame. It just kept cracking all the time. So I went thicker on the material. They broke. So then what I did was I just relieved the casting, because where the plate fits normally is pretty much straight across for the 4-stroke. Just relieved the casting a bit, and then I could just get that smoother radius there. Another issue was, obviously, with the vibration, I decided, which I mentioned in a previous video, that I was going to have the crank balanced with the rod and the piston and everything, so I've had that done. Now these two engine cases, I couldn't find two good cases, so they're off 2 different years, which isn't ideal, and I have got a match set at my friend's in Indiana, but it's getting them back over to the UK. That's I'm just sort of waiting to either I go over there or just get them shipped or whatever. So currently the difference is, this side would normally have something built up here and this tube would go into it, but obviously in this case it doesn't happen, doesn't got one. So I've filled that with epoxy and put the metal tube that is a Yamaha part into the epoxy for the gearbox breather. I made this little bracket here because there are differences. You can get some that these are longer, and this one I'll have a tendency to pop out, so I just made this little bracket out of some angle aluminium and it just holds it down. And then I've got a hydraulic Magura High-Mech hydraulic clutch system on it. That's a PWK Air Striker carb, and I just had to make a slightly longer tube in there, which is an aluminium tube, just to bridge that gap. That is a 2-stroke boot, otherwise a 250. I had to relieve the frame a tiny little bit here, not much, a few mil, just because it was rubbing a bit. And then I used these throw foot pegs and stuff like that. So next thing to talk about is probably the cylinder. So the cylinder is, let's say it's a Yamaha part. This was originally the bottom, sorry, this one was originally the bottom fin that I use, and then that distance, that part there, that's the top fin. And I take all these back, tapering in to create some clearance, and then I get a copper gasket that a guy in America made for a CR500, but I get him to leave it blank. The CR500, the PCD of the bolts is only like 1/2 mil to 1 mil different to the Yam. The Yam's slightly bigger, but they're in the same place. But so all I basically have to do is slightly elongate the holes in this, and the 500 head, CR500 head fits. And obviously make a new bracket, because obviously it was never designed for CR500 head, was it? This frame. These are YZF radiators, which are just had to modify the direction just so it clears, goes around. So basically then I get a sleeve, put it on. We use this fin here to weld it onto the bottom, use this here, and then I drill down through the copper and the aluminium and the fins, go in larger holes at the rear, smaller holes at the front, so that it has more even distribution of heat. And then I fire in the water pump, which is an electric water pump, which I've mounted on this side, and fires into the cylinder. It used to fire in there. There was a different exhaust on this. I used the KX500 one originally, so we moved that to here to fit that exhaust because it went up here. It was one of those bendy ones, like, you know, the KX500 that goes up, round, and it tucked in at an angle down there in that direction. So we moved this, but then it was catching on somewhere and I ended up having to bend it while it was in situ. But I could, for all intents and purposes, go back here and fire the water in that direction so that it swirls. Because the way I've took the fins away here, it automatically goes in here and across the exhaust bridge, picks up the majority of heat. The smaller holes restrict where it can go up, and it then basically transfers most of the heat around this side, and then this heat sends to here. This is for the water pump, so when you start the engine, it doesn't actually run the water pump. There's a controller which is tucked away up there. There's a controller up there that I can set the temperatures of when the pump kicks in and slow, and basically it starts slowly, and then as it warms up it'll start to spin faster and faster. Again, like you can see, they've blanked that and re-angled that. That just links to the radiator on the other side. So the two pipes go up, one into each radiator. At the top of each radiator, flows down, links the bottom, comes out of this on this side. So anything that's in that one will come to here, into the pump, back into the cylinder, up into the head, and so on. This is a 250 kickstart, which is a bit of a pain in the arse, which I have got a 426 one to go on it. The problem with this is it's a nut, whereas you really want a bolt, because that, as you turn it out, sort of touches the nut. It works, but it's a bit faffy. So I have got a 426 one. I've modified the shaft because I have to re-drill where the return spring goes through the shaft. It's in a different place on the 426. Once that's, well, I've done it, but once you do that, you can use the 426 shaft and then the 490 gear and spring and everything, and then a slightly longer, it's not much longer, but a slightly longer 426. It does a funny bend and comes about there. Kickstart. Back to the water cooling. I usually run a lighting coil from the stator, which runs into a regulator rectifier, and then there's a capacitor on it, and then that feeds the pump basically. I was having a bit of an issue with this, and I didn't know whether it packed in, and I was a bit miffed and I thought I can't really risk it not running, although it actually can cool properly even though it doesn't have a pump. So I fitted a lithium ion battery under there. The problem with that is when the engine stops, if it was running on the stator lighting coil, the pump will stop. That's fine, not a problem. That's what everything else does. But with a battery, it carries on running until this temp sensor gets to below a certain temp, then it'll stop. And I thought, well, that's going to really sap a load of electricity out of the battery for not really a lot of reason. So what I've done recently now is I've fitted a switch up here. So before I ride the bike, I can flick it on. It doesn't come on. Once it gets to temperature, pump kicks in. When I come back, stop the bike, the pump will be carrying on running. I'll probably leave it a minute or two, and then I'll just switch it off. And then that's it. Cools down nicely. And don't waste the battery power. So, right, we'll start on the top of the bike. This is another thing I've done recently, is put these X-Trig PDHS, again, for vibration, just to try and cut that down. I went to these twin wall bars, because I did have just fat bars on, and I think this did make an improvement for the vibration as well. I use this Boyson sort of, it's got like rubber cushions and you can change the rubber, and that just helps with a bit of, when the bike's going back and two, it's called a shuck out, it's supposed to reduce arm pump, but I use it because of blisters really. As the bike's rocking back and two, over the bumps doing this, my hand can stay quite still, and this hand I've got is permanently dislocated, so it helps me out with that. I have it on a few bikes. So these are KTM billet yokes. I had these yokes because I bought a set of forks which I had in a 150. The 150 KTM that I had, it was an import from Kuwait, and it had the 4CS forks in and they were crap. So I bought them other forks for it, ran them in it. Then when I sold the 150, put the original forks back in it. So I ended up with a set of yokes, and I was going to use those air forks. But then I saw these Öhlins for a KTM come up for sale, second hand for 1,500 quid. So I thought, well, I'll do that. And then that's why it's got a KTM front mudguard and number plate on. Anyway, so basically the front end's KTM fitment. And then I've got me these wheels, which I said in a previous video, I can't remember what the make is, but they're very similar to XL's own hubs, because they basically do a base hub and then you bolt on this carrier and fit the correct spacers to fit your bike. So I could put these in a Kawasaki, and I'll just buy a Kawasaki carrier. Same with the back wheel. You change the carrier and the disc carrier, but the main hub and everything is the same, and it fits any bike. And you just change these two components and they'll fit any bike. Right, next thing to talk about. So we've got the Pro Carbon tank cover, because it looks a bit cool. And then I got these light speed things that, like, sort of James Stewart used to run these sort of things on his Factory 125. Just a bit more air scoop. But they look pretty cool. They were in America. A friend brought them over for me. The cone pipe. You're probably asking about this cone pipe. So, because I took it, because I had the KX pipe, it was he took the whole bike and he just formed the pipe around, trying to get the length in to fit the bike, which is a bit odd, but it was all to do with the kickstart, really. Because the kickstart's here and most expansion chambers would come up here, the kickstart would be further back, and then it would be a bitch to start because it wouldn't get much of a throw on it. I tried to get as much rotation in a kick as possible to make it easier to start. The further back that is, the harder it is to start. So he built this pipe around there, and the only issue I've got with it is that on left hand turns, this goes in the sort of pushes in the berm and stands you back up. So that's the sort of issue I've got with it. These scratches are just where I'm getting it in past me other bikes and the foot pegs rub. So yeah, that's that. And then the silencer was for a CRF hybrid, a depth one, and we just took off one bracket from here, mounted it, and that one just uses the same as the Yam. And that fits fine. And then we've got a Kawasaki mount here and welded this onto the frame just to do that, rather than using this one on the silencer. Use it on the front pipe, and that's a Kawasaki one as well. And I've got these YZF carbon protectors, and that sort of gives a bit of protection to the water pump. That case is actually a go-kart one, and you can machine that out and put a seal in it in the bush and put another gear lever on here for when it's in a go-kart. And I can adjust the clutch centre worm screw with that, whereas you normally have to take all the case off on the Yamaha. So that was made a bit thicker so we could tap it, put thread in it and adjust it. So we've got an Öhlins TTX shock, which was it's actually for 2010, just modified a bit. And then we've got a collar so that it clears the swing arm. Now the swing arm, this is a Bormi swing arm from Italy. This was modified from a standard WR450 swing arm. So this is the original cast piece, and then everything's been made to fit it. So the inside and that is Yamaha, everything outside and that is Bormi. Kind of did it to look like the YZM 250 of 92 Donny Schmidt that sort of thing. These are Suzuki, and then I had to make a little plate on the back to bring them out in line so the bolt would actually touch it. Titanium, that's titanium. These are Cerakoted carbon guard on. That's a Nissin rear brake. The front one is a Brembo though. Again, I had to put the spacer in the back. They're bolted to it, so they stay together. The carbon chain guard. Front axle nuts titanium. A lot of bolts are aluminium, so they're really light and cheap. Got Boyson reeds, Wiseco piston. The reason I use the alloy bolts on this case is because if it kicks back, the bolts will break rather than the case, and they do break there sometimes. So that front disc is a braking bat's fly disc, which was actually one of Josh Coppins' discs from the era from this bike, and then it uses the Brembo on the front, which is just a KTM with a billet carrier. I think that's pretty much all of it. I'll just do some sort of distance on it now, which is quite a trick looking thing. Got a taller seat on it. Because I'm 6'4". You're probably looking at the WR in the background, and that's another video I'm going to do. Probably one on that TM as well. Probably do all my bikes, to be honest, but anyway. Any questions, just leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching.